Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
In the hot summer of 1967, a strange man walked out of prison, Charles Manson. By the end of that year, he'd gathered a group of young people, mostly runaway girls looking for love and adventure, who called themselves the Manson Family. They lived at Spahn Ranch, an old movie set in the desert outside Los Angeles. The place was falling apart, with broken-down buildings where cowboys once filmed Western movies. The family survived on drugs, stolen food, and Manson's crazy ideas about the end of the world. Manson told his followers that the Beatles were sending him secret messages through their songs, especially one called Helter Skelter. He said a big race war was coming where black people would kill all the white people, except for his family. They would hide in the desert until the fighting was over, then come out to rule the world. The family grew to about 100 people, mostly young women who had run away from home. They gave up their real names and took new ones that Manson gave them. They shared everything: food, clothes, even their bodies. Manson controlled them by giving them LSD almost every day and making them believe he was like Jesus. Life at the ranch was wild but harsh. They had no electricity or running water. They slept in old movie sets, caves, and broken-down buildings. The girls would go into town to get food from garbage cans or steal what they needed. Manson taught them that stealing was okay because regular society was evil. The ranch had an old man named George Spahn who owned it. He was almost blind, and the family took care of him in exchange for letting them stay. The girls would clean his house and keep him company, while Manson convinced him they were just harmless hippies. By August 1969, Manson decided it was time to start the race war himself. He picked his most loyal followers to do something terrible. On August 8th, 4 family members drove to a fancy house in the hills where actress Sharon Tate lived. She was 8 months pregnant and having a quiet night with friends. Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian broke into the house around midnight. What happened next was pure horror. They killed Sharon Tate and 4 other people with knives and guns. Tate begged them to spare her baby, but they showed no mercy. They stabbed her 16 times. The other victims were Jay Sebring, a famous hairstylist, Abigail Folger, whose family owned the coffee company, Wojciech Frykowski, a writer, and Stephen Parent, just a teenager visiting the house. The killers left their bodies scattered around the house and yard. The next night, they struck again. This time, Watson, Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten went to the home of Lino and Rosemary LaBianca. They tied up the couple and stabbed them to death. Then they wrote scary messages on the walls in blood like Helter Skelter and Death to Pigs. 9 people died in those 2 nights of killing. But here's the twisted part. Manson never actually killed anyone himself. He had brainwashed these young people so completely that they would murder strangers just because he told them to. The police had no idea who did it at first. The crimes seemed random and senseless. It took months before they connected the murders to the hippie cult living in the desert. In 1971, Charles Manson and 4 of his followers were found guilty of murder. They were sentenced to death, but California changed its laws, so they got life in prison instead. Manson died in jail in 2017 after spending 46 years behind bars. He was 83 years old and never showed any regret for what he'd done. Some family members are still in prison today, more than 50 years later. Others, like Linda Kasabian, helped the police catch Manson and got to go free. The old Spahn Ranch burned down in 1970, erasing the place where so much evil was planned. The Manson murders shocked America and changed how people thought about hippies and cults. Books, movies, and TV shows still tell the story today. Manson became famous for all the wrong reasons, showing how one sick person can turn lost young people into killers. His family proved that even love and peace can be twisted into something dark and deadly. Around 1989, Credonia Morinde and Joseph Kibwetir founded the Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God in southwestern Uganda. Morinde claimed visions of the Virgin Mary, while Kibwetir was a former Catholic catechist who felt the church had lost its way. They preached absolute obedience to their interpretation of the Ten Commandments. Followers fasted regularly, spoke little to avoid breaking commandments about lying, and were forbidden from using soap because leaders believed it was worldly vanity. Members ate only one meal per day. Children were separated from parents and raised communally. Member life was extremely harsh. They sold possessions to buy land for remote compounds where they prepared for an apocalypse that would cleanse the world of sin. The group grew to over 1,000 members across several compounds. Leaders controlled every aspect of daily life, from what people ate to when they could speak. New members had to give up all money and property, leaving them completely dependent on the group. On March 17, 2000, about 530 followers entered a hilltop church in Kanungu for what they thought was a special prayer service. The windows and doors were nailed shut from the outside, trapping everyone inside. Hours later, an explosion and fire broke out that could be seen for miles. But the horror was just beginning. Authorities later discovered nearly 400 more bodies in nearby graves and latrines. Victims killed days before the church fire, either poisoned or strangled. Autopsies revealed many victims had been poisoned with sulfuric acid mixed into their food and drinks. Others had been strangled or beaten to death. Police investigations revealed the leaders had been planning this massacre for weeks. They had stockpiled fuel and explosives and convinced followers they were preparing for a journey to heaven. President Museveni called it mass murder by false prophets who killed for money. The death toll reached around 778 people, making it Uganda's worst cult violence since Jonestown. Investigators confirmed this was mass murder, not mass suicide. The leaders had locked followers inside the church, then killed them with explosives and fire. Mwerindo and Kibwetir vanished before the massacre, with Interpol warrants issued for their arrest. Despite international manhunts, their current status remains unknown. The cult's land was later converted to farmland, but families of victims continued to push for a memorial. Though no justice was ever served for the leaders, this atrocity remains a dark warning about unchecked religious extremism and charismatic leaders who exploit people's faith for personal gain. Founded by Shoko Asahara in 1984, Aum Shinrikyo began as a small yoga and meditation school in Tokyo. Asahara claimed to have achieved enlightenment and attracted followers seeking spiritual growth. By the early 1990s, the group had grown to over 10,000 members and taken on dark apocalyptic beliefs. Asahara taught that the world would end in a nuclear war and that only his followers would survive. He claimed to be the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, demanding complete obedience. The cult recruited highly educated people, including scientists and engineers who helped develop chemical weapons, sarin and VX nerve gas, at secret laboratories near Mount Fuji. Members lived in communes where they gave up all possessions and followed strict rules. They meditated for hours, ate simple meals, and attended long lectures by Asahara. The group became wealthy through donations and business ventures, using money to buy land and fund their weapons program. Their first major attack occurred in June 1994 in Matsumoto, where they released sarin gas from a van, killing 8 people and injuring more than 500. Police initially blamed a local resident, not realizing it was terrorism. The horror peaked on March 20th, 1995, during Tokyo's morning rush hour. 5 cult members boarded crowded subway trains carrying plastic bags filled with liquid sarin. They placed the bags on train floors and punctured them with sharpened umbrella tips, then quickly left at the next stop. The deadly gas spread through the enclosed train cars. Passengers began choking, vomiting, and collapsing. Some lost their vision or had seizures. The attack killed 13 people and sickened about 6,000, causing widespread panic across Tokyo. The entire subway system was shut down, stranding millions of commuters. Hours later, police raided cult facilities across Japan, discovering chemical weapons laboratories, explosives, and millions of dollars in cash. They found enough chemicals to kill thousands more people. Asahara and senior members were arrested. Shoko Asahara and 12 high-ranking members were sentenced to death after lengthy trials and executed between 2018 and 2019. Over 200 other members were imprisoned, and the cult's assets were seized. The cult's religious status was revoked, though smaller remnant groups like Aleph still exist under strict government monitoring. The attacks led to major changes in Japanese law. New regulations were created for handling chemical weapons, and victim support laws were strengthened. Security was increased at transportation hubs and public buildings. Many survivors continued to suffer from long-term health problems, including migraines, respiratory issues, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The Tokyo subway sarin attack remains a chilling reminder of how a spiritual group with scientific knowledge can transform into a deadly terrorist organization.